Police versus people. State police travel to other states to pick up individuals now without always informing the local police. There has been a series of such incidents in recent times. Even as, within the states, policing remains inadequate, to put it mildly. We discuss policing in Punjab in particular, where the spread of drugs has risen substantially because of the politician-police mafia nexus and, of course, poor policing. The police is a strong arm of governments, and the service is used by the politicians for political ends. Transfers and postings, the whip and the carrot, has been used by the politicians to tame the police force over the decades. In the process, professionalism has been replaced by corruption and politicization, and now one can even say polarization. In this episode, we discuss all this and more. Welcome to another edition of Off Limits. Our guest this time is former Director General of Police from Punjab, Shashi Kant. He has been a known and is a recognized voice on the drugs menace. He has spoken out on rights and justice, and we are very, very happy to have you with us, Mr. Kant.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. You're welcome, and it's my pleasure that I'm here with you guys.
Right, thank you. So I am going to start with what I've just seen as an introduction where you introduce yourself. And you have said that you are perhaps the most controversial individual now, and you're a rebel and you're seeking drastic changes in the system. Now, I want you to talk about that because I have a couple of other questions on drugs and other things, but why are you the most controversial person?
Well, because I'm most controversial because I never told the laid down line which is laid down by the politicians as well as the government. And I have done rightly or wrongly whatever I thought was the right thing, and I was constantly and sort of up against various politicians, right from lowmost to topmost. I was way back in 80s, I was given 24 hours to leave the state. Otherwise, they said that I'll be sort of fixed up. I was pushed out of the state. I went to Delhi to start with. That turned out to be the best period of my life. I was with IB, I was with the RAW, I was with CBI, Ministry of External Affairs, Special Investigation Teams, postings abroad, in charge of security for all the missions abroad. And again, I'll say one notorious thing which really irks the politicians. I'm proud to have bashed up 3 sitting ministers.
You did? Tell us about that.
I bashed up 3 ministers, sitting ministers for that matter. God knows about how many MLAs, constant friction with the chief ministers. Way back in 80s, I was telling I was going almost 24 hours to leave the state. I landed up in Delhi in IB, then RAW, then IB, CBI, External Affairs, all sorts of ministries and investigations. And then when I came back, then I exposed the Punjab drug racket to the discomfiture of number of politicians and officials, including the colleagues in my police service.
So how come you were not, I mean, you even when you were banished to Delhi, you seem to have had a good time. Is that your attitude? Yeah. It's obviously your attitude, right, towards what happens. But tell me, this 1980s when you're talking about, was it during the Khalistan movement?
Yes, of course, it was during that movement, yes.
Right. So what happened, would you tell us? Because I would like to ask about those days as well.
Yeah, look, in fact, that time, like I said, I was banished. I was not here in Punjab. I was with certain intelligence agency in Delhi. So, and we were monitoring the developments here very, very closely. So what happened in the 80s, I'll just give you a short background, how come this thing started. Traditionally, Punjab and the west coast of Bombay have been traditional routes for smuggling of gold into India. Gradually, when prices of gold in the international markets got somewhat stabilized, and our neighbor here, Afghanistan and all those, the Golden Crescent, they were ready with their heroin, the opioid. and they started pushing it into India to start with the intent of pushing it abroad, primarily to the US. As you know, that most of the, about more than 50% of the drugs produced in the crescent, as also in the triangle, they ultimately land up in the United States, and then followed by, of course, the Europe. And but at that point of time, Punjab was passing through a phase where liquor was banned by a certain movement. That was in the Noales movement. He had got into this picture in 70s, to be precise, 77. And to start with, he had launched a religious come social reform movement. He said, hey, no alcohol, nothing. So the movement picked up, and then the militancy was started, then lots of this liquor vents, etc. They were targeted. And that was a time when it was sort of vacuum and so-called, within course, a bad period for the persons who were addicted to any kind of intoxicant, whatever it might be. That's the time when the heroin was supposed to go abroad. A good part of it, good chunk of it, they started selling it off in the local market in Punjab. And that is how the addiction started. And the kind of state that that not only
basically
Punjab,
are you saying that this whole drug menace also fed into the Khalistan movement at that time?
No. Khalistan movement was different.
Yeah.
What was happening, they were pumping in arms, ammunition, explosives, etc. Along with, they started pushing it because for all clandestine activities, the intelligence agencies out in those areas, they required money. And whatever money is allocated for intelligence purposes, that gets highlighted in the national budget. So they don't want to show that. So in most of the, you'll be surprised, in most of the intelligence agencies all over the world, including CIA and all those, they are into a drug business in a big way, because there they make clandestine money, and then they don't have to keep an account. Part of it goes into their pockets, part of it gets utilized in their operations. So it was like these two things are different, because very often people get confused. But yeah, I draw this line dividing both these things, that, hey, this is one thing, along with this is the other thing.
Right. So and you were sort of helping crack down on the drug mafias and the whole route. Why? Is that one of the reasons why you were, or the reason why you were shifted?
Yeah, no, at that point there were hardly any drugs. That was just an ordinary political thing, a murder case. I was asked to frame somebody. I said, sorry, I won't do it. I did the right thing. Powers that be, they got angry. Then I bashed up some minister, and they said, okay, get out of the state, etc., the kind of story. So the drug thing started only in 80s, and I exposed it in late 80s. The first time when I talked about drugs was in 87. Before that, frankly, I was also not aware about the extent of this drug menace in the state. I was also not aware. 87, just by chance, this information. Then I was heading the Punjab intelligence. Just by chance, this information came up, and then we studied, and we found, hey, man, it's really a serious situation out here.
So you found it very difficult through the years. It's grown alarmingly, hasn't it?
Yes, I'll say yes to that.
And is that because the system itself is caught up in different arms of the system, as it were, caught up in this whole drug, I don't want to say trafficking, but in this whole issue?
Yeah, drug is just a small part. Can I ask you one question here?
Yeah.
The question is, how many, I'm not blaming anybody, you're not blaming anybody. It's just an academic question that I'm putting up. How many politicians do you know who filed their correct reports to the Election Commission about the expenses incurred during the elections? The report which goes, let's find, is 10 lakhs, 50 lakhs, whatever it is. Where is 50 lakhs we spend here in the Panchayat elections? From where the money comes? Not necessarily from drug, but there's so many mafias. You've got road mafia, you've got timber mafia, you've got education mafia, you've got sand mafia, you've got drug mafia, so many mafias. And even if it's not coming from the mafias, this is a tainted money. I'm sure that you will not give your white money to anybody, will you? No, nobody in the right senses will do such a thing. So basically, good chunk of whatever gets used in the elections and all those things, it is, I'll say, a gray money. Not necessarily this kind, but certainly a person can question their origin.
Right.
So this is the situation. That's why I said you talked about the system. I said this is the entire system. And it's not only politicians. A substantial chunk of officials belonging to various rungs of the state governance. This is a very wide word I'm using. A number of them, they are also using it. Somebody is getting a car as a president. Somebody wants to go abroad. Hey, man, can you finance my visit abroad? Or somebody's kids are studying. Hey, can you finance education of the kids abroad? So lots of things. It's in fact the entire scenario is really absolutely gray and colored.
Yeah. So, in where the drugs thing, now you've said that it has increased alarmingly, and you have various governments and chief ministers coming all over the years, oh, we are going to control it, there's a big issue, we'll do something about it. Now, various arms of the government, the politician, the bureaucrat, the police, others, all seem to be part of a certain racket, which basically protects the racket rather than exposes it, right?
Substantial part of them, yes.
Yeah, well, some of them, of course, not everyone. So then what have you been suggesting? What can be done to control this?
Look, I tried my level best. I started meeting people and NGOs and politicians, etc., etc. Nothing happened. Then it was way back in 2013. Then I filed in fact, I was called by the then Chief Justice of Punjab and Haryana High Court to suggest and to assist the court, assist within courts, as far as the drug racket is going on in Punjab jails. There was a certain writ petition, the Lok Singh versus something else versus state of Punjab. Court asked me to appear in the court and suggest what should they do. I gave them certain points that this is the way you can control the minister.
One or two of those points. What do you think should be done?
Basically, it's the amount of supervision, etc., etc. But the major
good policing, maybe good policing,
policing, etc., and the role of influential persons belonging to various segments of the society, because they're what these persons mostly and heavily rely upon. These are the antisocial elements, strong arm, what we call bahubalis, etc., etc. So that was a different thing, a smaller part. I will not go into it. At that point of time, I suggested to the Chief Justice, I said, sir, the problem is, as long as you have an influx of drugs in the open society, then certainly part of it, a good chunk, whatever you call it, is certainly going to get landed up, not only the prison houses, but in wherever it might be. We have to tackle this thing. He said, yes, that's absolutely right. Can you give it in writing? I gave it in writing. Court was very kind enough. They declared that they are going to accept my letter as a letter petition, and they said that, okay, it is going to be CWP 20359 of 2013, court on its own motion versus State of Punjab and others. That's how I started fighting this menace through the courts. Then again, our drug policy was again, national drug policy was again nothing but a sort of full of all holes. Then we approached the central government. We said, okay, this is the policy is totally wrong. It needs to be corrected. Then certainly there were some amendments, but still the policy is not foolproof. Still hasn't it, unfortunately.
And your present government, do you think is sort of committed, or has it kept quiet about the drugs issue, or do you think?
I hope that till now. Sorry, again, I know that I'm a sort of a loud mouth. I have not seen any positive things. In fact, I had approached the powers that be, Prime Minister's office, etc., the top rung of the security echelons that we have. Everybody said yes, it's a serious matter, but I failed to see on ground. But that's made a little bit more and more parts and more different kinds of drugs are landing up here. Not only this manual transaction, but even through your darknet and all those things, everything is coming in. It's available, openly available.
So it's grown substantially in that.
Substantially. It's a monster. It's growing every day, getting out of all proportions.
Right. At one time when we had covered this whole movement in the 80s, in fact, I covered from the first Morcha to Operation.
Oh, really?
Yes, it was. I mean, Punjab was more our home than anywhere else. All young reporters, and it was. It's another fascinating period of history. Love it or hate it, or denounce it or criticize it. It was still a very, very important aspect in our history. So, Right now, there was another incident in Patiala where the Khalistan slogan was raised. And of course, everybody went ballistic about it in Delhi. How do you see that when you put it in a context? How do you see that? Is that a real sentiment, or is that something that you do when you feel you're under pressure? I mean, I'm talking the young people who are raising this slogan.
Yeah, I'll reply the very sort of specific and categorical, etc. Whatever my English is bad, so don't mind that. So a clear-cut reply I'll give. Look, as on date, there is no Khalistan. Nobody wants Khalistan. Khalistan in Punjab is dead for all practical purposes.
Right.
More so because I have been saying that if anybody even wants to talk generally and academically about Khalistan, started from Lahore, because that's the real Punjab, and that's from where the real Sikh Empire, the first Sikh Empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh started. So why do you want to truncate it, Khalistan? Take that entire West Punjab, which is sitting in Pakistan also. So anyhow, all these things went on. As on date, in Punjab, there is no Khalistan thing at all. But unfortunately, these militant circles, as also the ISI and all those things which had been operating all those years, they still have their sleeper cells intact. Now, sleeper cell, like people say that very often, journalists ask me this question, the sleeper cell, that you mean that's a failure of the police administration or government or whatever it is? I said, no, who are chosen are designated as sleeper cells? Persons who don't have any record, who don't appear anywhere. Just like that story, what was that jackal who was out to kill Charles de Gaulle? So just like that story, these persons are totally anonymous. Nobody knows about them. They are recruited ideologically or financially or whatever it is. The first instance in the recent past which came up was of the blast in Ludhiana port. There again, the person who had come, who had blasted the thing, he was not known to the police officers. He was not known to the administration. He was not known even to the neighbors that he is doing all these things. He is harboring all these things. And during interrogation, one name had come up, some Rinda, Harjinder Rinda, I think that's the name, who was earlier a small kind of drug racketeer. He was running this thing in some part where he was somewhere in Firozpur or somewhere. Then he went to Nader Sahab. From there, ultimately, he became a big smuggler and went off to Pakistan through Nepal. He's sitting somewhere abroad only right now. His name had come up. Now, second thing is whatever happened in Patiala, you say. This another group which has come up, Sikhs for Justice, Pannu's group. And in fact, I'm shocked. This person is sitting abroad. He doesn't have any following. His so-called campaign of referendum 2020 just petered out like as if it was never heard of. But through social media, use of social media, he has indoctrinated so many persons that, in fact, there is no record, there's no study on this thing. He's indoctrinated.
That's bad policing. That's bad policing. If he's indoctrinated so many people, yes, how come he's not on the list?
Yes, it's a bad policing. It's bad policing. Is indoctrinated. But the question is, social media, I'm on social media, you are on social media, most of persons are on social media. There, whatever we see, whatever we imbibe, sometimes we comment to that, sometimes we don't comment. We keep it in our heart, yes, whatever he's saying is right or wrong, as per our own perception. So this person, Parwana person of Patiala incident, in fact, there were two groups. This person, Pannu had said that 29th, we should do something. Why April 29th? You had covered militancy in Punjab. In 1986, 29th of April, a group of militants had gathered in the Golden Temple complex, and they had announced the formation of so-called, again within quotes, Khalistan. Since then, a small group here and there has been celebrating April 29th as the day when they claim the foundations of course, they are saying it wrongly. Again, within quotes, the foundation of Khalistan were raised. So this was the significance of April 29. Pannu sitting out there in the US made some statements. This person called Harish Singla, who belongs to some Hindu group or something, and he said, okay, we are going to take out Khalistan March. And during interrogation, it appears what's coming out, reason why he said this thing that he'll take out anti-Khalistan march is basically he wanted to come into limelight. And in Punjab, like in most of the states, to having a government paid security, that's the biggest possible thing. That's an achievement of their lifetimes. So I think he had one or two persons already given to him, probably wanted to sort of increase the size of his entire so-called security cover or whatever it is. And then he said, okay, I'm going to take out to get some brownie points or something. This was opposed to by this other group led by Parwana, which has been indoctrinated. Before that, he had not come to know. He was just known that he was slightly hardliner. But of course, there are so many hardliners. You go and don't pick up everybody and put them behind the jail because, like Supreme Court has also then having a academic discussion or general discussion. That's no often till such time you don't take up to arms and you indulge in violence.
Right.
So he said, okay, we are going to do it. Now, lots of videos are around. His old videos, particularly which have been released by the police, which say that he's giving provocative call that, hey, 29th is coming, come to Patiala, we have to do something. All sorts of those instigating messages or videos are floating around.
Mm.
So he took out. Now, again, talking of the failure of the administration, Patiala they had put up posters about it. They had applied to the police to give permission to take out their marches, which was denied. Right, absolutely right. That they were denied. Okay. Then, but Patiala has district special branch. There, Punjab intelligence is sitting, and the office of one of the important national security agencies also exists there. And they normally remain in touch most of the time. I'm surprised at how they didn't know about it. I can't believe it. And the state intelligence also, all the state intelligences, even the other security agents, they always, every day they take out a letter for internal circulation, which reaches all concerned persons right up to the very top. Punjab intelligence also does it. I'm sure that they must have taken out that letter, which has been a practice for ages now, for decades, and decades, started during British time sometime.
Yeah.
I'm sure that powers that be CM's office, etc., must have been informed, but everybody was sitting comfortably. Nobody took any action.
It's so interesting, as being a journalist for decades now, every time there's an incident, after that, you realize there's intelligence failure, there's police failure, there's political, of course, inability to recognize anything, or disinterest, or complicity, who knows. But it's all the time. So when we talk of this great state, and we think of this deep state, and we talk of Pegasus and surveillance, on one side, it's there for the individual citizen, but it's not there in these kind of times.
You said it absolutely rightly. You said it absolutely rightly. And it's a very, I'll say, I will not go into failures because you've already said it. Yes, to that I agree. It appears that system, whether it's social system or government system or whatever, it's the entire thing appears to have degenerated.
Right. And in this, the role of the police, this will be the last part. I'm talking of, would you agree with an assessment that perhaps the low point for the Punjab police was in the 80s during the Khalistan movement?
That was a low point as also a high point.
Okay.
Low because there was massive law and order problems, etc. and etc. And the brownie point is that they successfully coped up with it and controlled the situation. There has been acclaim internationally. International acclaim is there. They said, yeah, Punjab police, along with other forces, security forces of the country, they were able to do it. Otherwise, at that point of time, it appeared as if situation was totally getting out of the hand and there was no way to control it. Yes, hello, and certainly Punjab police had its own sense, not only Punjab police, entire security setup which was involved. They had their own brownie points and they came out fantastically well out of that.
Right. And you feel that the Punjab police at that time was able to retain its professionalism?
They had retained their professionalism. Well, that's again a dicey question. Because if you talk of professionalism as such, it was only because of the kind of police leadership that we had in KPSL, etc., etc. And again, if you talk of this thing, then again, there are lots of police officers who really made good amount of money during that point of time. They were the persons who had their own group of so-called cats. They sort of grab people's land and property and all sorts of things.
And rights violations.
Yes, human rights violations, certainly they were there. But worse than that is that grabbing. If I come and grab your property, you'll call it a human right violation, or you call it blatant attempt at your entire personality, entire thing that you have. That's what happened at that point of time. Lots of police officers, they made really massive amounts of money and captured marlas and marlas and murabbas and murabba, whatever it is of land.
So that's what it is. We've seen the police get power of the kind that they got in Punjab during the time, over and above the politician in a sense, where they become the politician, they grab the land, they get the spoils, rights violations are not questioned because the issue is so big and you have to contain it no matter what. And excesses take place. And then on the other side, say like in Uttar Pradesh today, where the police is completely controlled, follows a political line, and you have all these videos coming out every now and again of the police pelting stones at citizens.
Look, I'll reply to this particular question in another way. We were trained in the National Police Academy, Hyderabad. When we were being trained, lots of senior police officers of the rank of Director General or Inspector General, whatever they were, they used to come and address us. There was one particular extremely senior officer who had come to our class to address us and to motivate us that, well, at that point of time when we are young, we are always idealistic. And we just fresh out of school, colleges, and we still, at that point, had our loose tongue. So when he was addressing one of my batchmates, he said, "Sir, I have got one question. Can you explain it?" He said, "Yeah, tell me." He said, "Tell me why it happens that with each promotion, police officers lose at least 2 vertebrae, and by the time they reach the very top, they don't have any vertebra left, and just keep on moving around like snails at the feet of politicians and powers that be." I hope that answers the question.
Right. No, it does. It does actually. So now what do you see? Do you see a certain rot, like you had the Prakash Singh reforms, you've always had a discussion at least around reforms, and then of course reforms were never implemented in the way they should by the politicians. Why? I was going to answer it, but I'm going to ask you why.
Look, very recently, a couple of days back only, I had written an article, what ails Punjab, what ails the Indian police. Yes, right from various initial years, like right from when this Police Act was created in 18s, in early 19th century. Before that, there was a commission set up by the British government, Lord Cornwallis, if I'm not wrong. Ever since that, there have been a number of commissions, important court judgments, views of senior politicians, journalists, the entire strata put together. Now you talk to a Prakash Singh case, I'm talking about the Dharamveer's report, etc., etc. Why they have not been implemented? Unfortunately, police has always been considered the strong arm of state police. A state government, not state government, central government, any government for that matter, that it might be. And like I told you, that kind of thing, it's a losing vertebrae, that syndrome is also there. And unfortunately, like other services, we don't have parallel posts. In IAS, there's one chief secretary, but there are innumerable other posts like heading some corporation and this and that, this and that. Whereas in Punjab, there is one DGP sitting there, maybe one or two more couple sideline DGPs, etc., etc. DGP rules and DGP weights and measures and DGP shoe polishing or whatever you call it. So everybody wants that seat. Everybody wants to be on the right side of police. And politicians, governments also want to use the police. That's why none of these recommendations have been implemented in right earnest. Even the famous judgment of Prakash Singh, which is delivered by the Supreme Court, the way that is sidelined with impunity, at least I get absolutely amazed and I don't know what to do. They say that they'll fix tenure. Okay. But somehow the other, they'll force the officers that, okay, write that I don't want to remain here because of personal reasons, health reasons, etc., etc. They force the officers to write it. And they write it because they want to be on some position or the other.
Of course.
And they say on his own request, okay, abiding by the Supreme Court, this thing, we kick him out, bring in another person. Again, the normal tenure of any of these cutting-edge officers had not been 2 years anywhere in the entire country.
Right. So is this proximity of the police to the politician in the sense that you're the force that the politician can control, and from the lowliest constable to the highest officer, everybody is sort of victim of this politics? Is that the reason why you have written again in that introduction where you have described yourself that I ain't a bloody politician and want to remain glued onto my basic convictions, ideologies, etc. And I don't give a damn about politicians and their henchmen?
As a fact, that's added right there. And you said that, well, again, if the police officer of any rank, whatever, right from constabulary up to whatever it might be, I don't think that they sort of given because of pressure only. Most of the time, they're given voluntarily. Purpose being, oh my God, that prize posting should be mine. I should be the DGP. I should be India's ambassador to United States or United Nations or whatever. It's our own ambition versus the way the politicians maneuver us. I will not blame the politicians only. I blame ourselves as well. I blame ourselves also. So that's what it is.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kant. This was very interesting, and we'll be in touch. That was a discussion with an outspoken, forthright police officer, and he made some interesting points. One, that there is no Khalistan movement in Punjab, regardless of some propaganda here and there. There's no question of it. Two, that the drugs menace has expanded substantially and nobody seems to be in a mood to check it, neither the governments, nor the politician, or the system around it. And three, that there is this close liaison and control of the police by the politician, but the policeman himself and the officer himself is responsible for this because of overriding ambition and because of corruption. And so it seems to be very difficult for that liaison and that nexus to break in a manner where the police service reacquires its professionalism. Well, thank you. And do let us know what you think of the interview.